The Galactic Council had made their decision 300 years ago. Humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, and far too emotional to be trusted among the civilized species of the universe. They called Earth a quarantine zone. They built monitoring stations around the solar system. They watched humanity like scientists watching bacteria in a petri dish, waiting for the primitive species to destroy itself. Commander Xyloth of the Valorian Empire remembered reading those old reports when he was young. Humans were described as creatures of war, beings who killed their own kind over land, resources, and ideas. The Council had voted unanimously to keep them contained. No contact, no trade. No acknowledgement that they even existed. It was cleaner that way. Safer. But now, standing on the bridge of his dying flagship, watching the Void Swarm consume another one of his battle cruisers, Xyloth understood that the Council had been wrong about everything. The Void Swarm had appeared from the dark space between galaxies 6 months ago. Nobody knew what they were or where they came from. They were not alive in any way the Council species understood. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply consumed. Every ship, every station, every planet they touched was broken down into raw matter and absorbed into their ever-growing mass. The Council's combined fleets had thrown everything they had at the swarm. Advanced plasma weapons, gravity bombs, antimatter cannons. Nothing worked. The swarm adapted to every attack within hours. They learned. They evolved. They kept coming. Xyloth watched the tactical display as another section of his fleet vanished into the darkness. His species, the Valorians, were known for their logical minds and calm under pressure. But even he felt something close to fear crawling up his spine. They had lost 11 core worlds in the past month. The projection showed that at the current rate of advancement, the swarm would reach the Council's capital world in less than 60 days. That was when the transmission came through. It was on an old frequency, one that had not been used in centuries. The message was simple and direct. It came from the quarantine zone. It came from Earth. We know what is happening. We have been watching. We can help. But you need to ask. The Council had debated for 3 days. Some argued that this was a trick. Others said that even if humans could help, accepting their assistance would mean admitting that the quarantine had been a mistake. Pride was a powerful thing, even in the face of extinction. But Xyloth had not waited for the Council to make up their minds. He had sent a response on his own authority, knowing it might cost him his command, his rank, and possibly his life. "We are asking," he had transmitted back to Earth. "Please help us." The human ships arrived 2 weeks later. They were ugly things by Valorian standards. Blocky and rough, covered in what looked like patches and repairs. They moved through space with none of the grace of Council vessels. Xyloth had expected a fleet of thousands based on the intelligence reports about human military capacity. Instead, only 12 ships emerged from faster-than-light travel near his position. 12 ships against an enemy that had destroyed millions. The lead vessel hailed him. On his view screen appeared a human female with dark skin and silver hair pulled back tight against her skull. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and completely unafraid. "Commander Xyloth," she said. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We received your message. We came as fast as we could." Xyloth struggled to hide his disappointment. "Admiral Chen, I appreciate your willingness to assist, but I must be honest with you. The Void Swarm has destroyed fleets of 10,000 ships. Your 12 vessels, while I am sure they are capable, cannot possibly make a difference against such an enemy." Admiral Chen smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile Xyloth had seen on predators right before they struck. "Commander," she said, "you have been fighting this enemy for 6 months using the same tactics, the same weapons, and the same strategies. You keep trying to overpower them. You keep trying to destroy them with force. And they keep adapting because that is what they do. They learn from direct attacks. They evolve defenses against anything you throw at them. Then what do you suggest? Xyloth asked, genuinely curious despite his skepticism. We do not try to overpower them, Chun replied. We do not fight them the way they expect. We cheat. Over the next several hours, Admiral Chun explained the human plan. It was insane. It was reckless. It violated at least 17 articles of the Council's warfare conventions. Xyloth listened to every word with growing disbelief. The humans had spent 300 years in quarantine. They knew they were being watched. They knew the galaxy had rejected them, so they had prepared. They had studied every piece of information they could intercept about the greater galaxy. They had built weapons that the Council would never have approved. They had developed tactics that polite civilizations would have found distasteful. The Void Swarm adapted to direct attacks. So the humans would not attack directly. Instead, they would use what Admiral Chun called psychological warfare, combined with what she described as dirty tricks. The first phase involved broadcasting a signal that mimicked the swarm's own internal communication frequency. Human scientists had spent months analyzing captured fragments of swarm matter to Unwanted, understand how the individual components coordinated with each other. The signal would not destroy the swarm, but it would confuse them, making them hesitate, making them pause to figure out what was happening. The second phase was worse. The humans had developed a biological agent, a synthetic virus that targeted the organic components hidden within the swarm's mechanical structure. The Council had never realized the swarm had organic parts because they had never gotten close enough to study them properly. The humans had. They had sent unmanned probes directly into swarm-controlled space, sacrificing dozens of ships to gather the information they needed. The third phase was something the humans called mutually assured destruction deterrent. Deployment. Xyloth did not fully understand the technical details, but the basic concept was terrifying. The humans had built weapons that would destroy themselves along with their targets. They had ships piloted by volunteers who knew they would not survive the mission. They had created bombs that would tear holes in the fabric of space itself, causing damage that would take centuries to heal. Your people would sacrifice themselves? Xyloth asked, unable to keep the shock from his voice. Admiral Chun's expression did not change. Commander, humanity has been sacrificing itself since we first learned to make fire. We die for our families. We die for our friends. We die for complete strangers if we believe the cause is just. You kept us locked in our solar system because you thought we were too violent, too dangerous. You were right. We are dangerous. But right now, that is exactly what you need. The battle began 3 days later. The human ships moved into position, while Xyloth's remaining fleet drew the swarm's attention with a conventional attack. The Council vessels suffered heavy losses, exactly as expected. But while the swarm was focused on them, the human ships slipped around the edges of the battlefield. The confusion signal activated first. Across the swarm's massive formation, units began to stutter and slow. They were not destroyed, but they were no longer coordinating properly. Gaps appeared in their defensive patterns. Weaknesses that had never existed before suddenly became visible. Then came the biological agent. Human missiles carrying the synthetic virus punched through the gaps in the swarm's defenses. They detonated deep within the enemy formation, releasing clouds of engineered particles that began to attack the organic components of the swarm from the inside. The swarm reacted with something that almost looked like panic. For the first time in 6 months of warfare, the enemy was not adapting. They were dying. But the swarm was vast, and even wounded, they were dangerous. A massive section of the formation broke away and surged toward the human fleet, determined to destroy the source of their pain. Admiral Chun's voice came across the communication channel, calm and steady. All hands, prepare for Phase 3. It has been an honor serving with you. 3 of the 12 human ships accelerated directly into the heart of the incoming swarm mass. They were moving too fast to be stopped, too fast to be consumed. Xyloth watched as they penetrated deep into the enemy formation and then detonated. The explosions were not normal. They were not fire and light and debris. Instead, they were tears in reality itself, wounds in the fabric of space that pulled everything nearby into oblivion. The swarm sections caught in the blast simply ceased to exist. Thousands upon thousands of enemy units vanished in an instant. When the light faded, the remaining swarm forces were in full retreat for the first time since the war began. They fled back toward the dark space between galaxies, their numbers reduced by more than half in a single engagement. Admiral Chun's ship was still intact, so were 8 of the other human vessels. 3 had been sacrificed, their crews giving their lives to save a galaxy that had rejected their entire species. Xyloth opened a channel to the human flagship. He did not know what to say. Thank you seemed inadequate. Apologies seemed presumptuous. Admiral Chun spoke first. Commander Xyloth, the swarm will return. They will adapt to what we did today. But now you know they can't be hurt. Now you know they can be driven back. And now you know that humanity is willing to stand beside you in this fight. Why? Xyloth asked. We abandoned your people. We treated you like animals. We left you alone for 3 centuries. Why would you help us? Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment before she answered. Because that is what humans do, Commander. We help, even when we are hated, even when we are feared, even when we have every reason to turn our backs and walk away. We help because it is the right thing to do. And maybe, just maybe, we help because we want to prove that you were wrong about us. The Galactic Council held an emergency session that night. The vote was unanimous, just as it had been 300 years ago. But this time, the decision was different. The quarantine was lifted. Humanity was invited to join the galactic community, not as prisoners, but as allies. Not as a threat to be contained, but as a species essential to survival. Xyloth attended the ceremony where Admiral Chun formally accepted the Council's invitation. He watched as she shook hands with leaders from a dozen different species, each one looking at her with a mixture of respect and lingering uncertainty. After the ceremony, he approached her. Admiral, I must ask, during those 300 years of isolation, did your people ever hate us? Chun considered the question carefully. Some did. Some still do. But most of us understood that fear is a powerful thing. You were afraid of what we might become. We cannot blame you for that. We can only show you what we choose to become instead. Xyloth nodded slowly. And what is that, Admiral? What do humans choose to become? Admiral Chun looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. The same stars that humanity had been forbidden to explore for so long. Whatever is needed, she said. We become whatever is needed. The war against the Void Swarm would continue for another decade. There would be more battles, more losses, and more sacrifices. But from that day forward, humanity stood at the center of the Galactic Alliance. The species that had once been unwanted among the stars had become the one thing the universe could not survive without. And in the end, that was the most human outcome of all.